Okay, I guess we'll get started. Welcome again. Great to see you all. And since there's some new people, so I would like to briefly introduce our team. My name is Truong Lu. You can just usually call me Lei, and I'm Associate Director of Research Engagement in the professional development for PhD and Postdoc. And I'm also a WashU PhD alumni. I graduated from the BBS programs with the front-end microbiome biosciences.
And I'm Dr. Carl Ferris. I'm Assistant Director here at WashU. My background is in humanities and social sciences primarily.
Excellent. And today, this workshop will have decision making for PhD and postdoc. As I said, this is part of our foundational workshop series. This is probably our 9th session, if I remember correctly. And if you missed some of the early sessions, which include, for example, how to write your resume, how to networking, how to set up your LinkedIn, and many other topics, feel free to check out newsletters and also check our website. We'll post some of the recordings over there. But as always, we really encourage you to attend in person because that really maximizes the learning outcomes here. And this foundational workshop series is brought to you by collaborating with TBS, like you said. So for those who haven't checked in, please use the QR code on the table here to check in so that we can follow up with you with slide deck. And today, this is our agenda. We have about 1.5 hours together, and our time is very valuable. Our time is also very valuable. So I do hope this is a productive session for all of us. And as I always say, the success of this workshop does not only really kind of depend on us, it's also dependent on you. So I hope everybody can stay engaged and participate in the discussions. So we will understand negotiation and some of the challenges, also understand very briefly why it's important to negotiate. And then we'll focus most of the time to talk about how to do the negotiations, how to make decisions. Then will be plenty of time for us to do Q&A. And feel free to raise your hand and ask questions and in any part of the presentation. And since we have students who are in the market, and we also serve students who are still in the early stage of their education, so we want to make sure this is relevant to all of you. And the negotiation, by definition, is really any situation you want to advocate for your needs under constraints. So it's not only about job negotiation, which is a very important part, and we'll spend most of the time to talk about that. And many of the principles should be applicable to other situations as well. But I do want us to kind of discuss a little bit here. What are some of the negotiations you are dealing with right now? What are some of the things you wish you had asked but you didn't? Any type of negotiation. And I want us to do the popcorn style, just share your opinions if you want to say something.
Take that time to do your research and some kind of like the balance between teaching and research, how much of it that I should negotiate with like
teaching, research, project, workload, all those type of things, project priorities. That's great. What else?
Perhaps negotiating to pursue opportunities that aren't necessarily like within the like border lap of finding a balance between your PI school and personal career goals.
Yes, research and also your professional goals or other interests. Excellent. What else?
Something I struggle with is if we're say working on like a collaborative project or like a group project and like no one volunteers to do anything. I don't know how to like negotiate splitting up the work instead of doing it all myself.
Yes, delegate tasks. Workload planning. Yeah.
I've negotiated for salaries and ambassador for the PhD program, but something that I'm considering moving forward, which is influenced by a physician friend, is hiring a legal expert in contracts. So he said that he had a colleague that looked through his contract of work and kind of pointed out different things that he could have negotiated for, and he ended up negotiating for a 4-day workday and like a bonus and all these other benefits. So like I have a lot of friends in law, like I'm considering hiring someone, paying a friend to look through the contract before I sign especially for like a big job.
Don't need about so like work flexibility, all this. Okay, great. I think again, here this is negotiation you might be dealing with based on our understanding and research. And I think you touched almost all of the different parts. And what I just want to call out here is, for example, in job, you may want to negotiate, whether you want to work remotely, not only just work schedules, but where you want to work, things like that. And academically, negotiate authorship. Authorship is another important one, and I think I'm sure I encountered that when I was a PhD student. Project scope, request funding to go to conferences to support your professional development. I think you could ask that. Professional development, again, I think you mentioned that. Interpersonal lab dynamics, personal, again, I think you mentioned most of that. And personally here, in future, you may buy your house, buy a car, and you may receive some kind of unexpected bill, medical bill that are very large, and that is very large. And there you need to really apply your negotiation skills, and I definitely did all those things. So great. So negotiations really have many different aspects, and here we are really going to learn that together. Again, many of the concepts can be applied no matter what the situation is. Now I'm going to ask, what is your biggest challenge or fear when we talk about negotiation in any of those scenarios?
Probably like, even if I researched it and like take a lot of notes, I'm gonna end up rambling and not leaving like the space to like have them kind of participate in the negotiation.
Don't just talk, but really have a good conversation, right? Negotiating. Yeah.
That my request to come off as ignorant of like the industry or government I did in a way that reflects negatively on my professionalism.
We want to negotiate, showing your professionally, use that as a kind of add value in the whole entire process or anything. Yeah.
As a humanities student, I'm thinking about power relations, hierarchies. Also in academic.
Yeah, so true, right? And especially for us, PhD and postdoc, we're really in our stage of our career. Yeah. One more answer?
I think someone said it, but I would like to add, I would say to express what they want without appearing like too blunt and rude. So that is something strong.
Yeah. Articulate your needs in a way that get other people's idea. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Again, we did some research and we found this is really a common challenges, right? I think you mentioned many of those. Some people may say, okay, if I negotiate, they will receive the offer. In reality, this rarely happens if you handle it, professionally. Because when it comes to the negotiation step, their goal is try their best to get you hired. Because you are really the best candidate. Otherwise, you have a huge risk. They may need to move toward the second best candidate, or they may need to restart the hiring process, which is a huge trouble. And I think we also mentioned, how to do it gracefully. Academia doesn't negotiate, but there are so many areas we can negotiate. We should be grateful and just accept. Again, negotiation and showing appreciation doesn't conflict with each other. I don't have that much leverage at early stage PhD and postdoc. I think we mentioned that. Negotiation is about appealing. Some people say, how to present it nicely so that other people are willing to accept our negotiation, and how to raise my reasons, give the reasons that is reasonable, right? After doing research, I think all of those things are the challenges we may face. And then now I want to discuss why it is so important to negotiate.
they are incentivized to lowball us.
No more about us.
Lowball, like give a lowball offer to us, so they kind of expect that the other parties will negotiate, so we don't negotiate.
Yeah, great point. They kind of expect you to do that.
Work for your own success.
Exactly. It's actually for the opportunities, sources, you get higher paid.
I don't know if this applies to academia, but in like some places in industry or like in private companies, like negotiating might be the way you would get like a job promotion or something.
There's good for your development, right? Get a promotion, get a bonus, get some additional compensation. One more. Negotiation process with the boundaries. Set your expectation and boundaries, right? Cool. Again, yeah. So just first I want to share, before I share kind of why it's important to negotiate, I want to share some stats. Only 37% of the professionals negotiate for the first offer, but more than 85% of lawyers actually expect to negotiate. I think somebody mentioned that. And also, for those who negotiate, it's good for you, right? You get more income, or on average, they get 7 to 10% more base, and including other benefits. And this may sound small, 7%, it's not a big deal. But if you count over your working time, because your next job offer usually is also kind of dependent on your first job offer. So over the years, you may lose more than 500K or you want. And this is not counting the compounding factor for the time. You know, if you could have used this money for investment and other things. So it could be a big loss if we didn't negotiate. And also there are research and also a lot of data showing that women are less likely to negotiate than men, even though when they negotiate, they could achieve the outcomes. And early stage, you know, when you find your first job, they are less likely to negotiate. I'm sure later when you have, you know, down the road for your second or third jobs, you may become more confident or familiar with negotiation. But for the first job, very few people do that. So that's why it's so important to learn the skills, right? And it's important to negotiate in other contexts, for other reasons as well. For example, to set the boundary and the expectation to prevent downstream conflicts, such as authorship or project scope. Somebody also mentioned that. And also align your projects with your long-term career goals so that you're not really just doing some lab tasks or doing the research your PhDs do. You're really pursuing things you want to do, and you have the ownership in this process. And all the things that help you. And secure access to key resources, I think we talked about. And that's very importantly, negotiation is a skill. Negotiation is a skill. And if you can build the confidence, if you can build kind of the professional identity, you are a person good at negotiation. That is really something very valuable. Essentially, as you grow in your career, negotiation is such an important skill. So I do want us to start to learn and practice now so that down the road, we can really be a pro in this process. And I'm a visual person. So this is really the take-home message I hope you can get at the end of the workshop. So negotiation is really about kind of a conversation between you and the other party, right? And we are really equal in this process. Negotiation is not to say, okay, I want to indicate my needs and then kind of affect other people's rights. It's not I become bigger and other people become smaller. It's really I indicate clearly my needs, my requests, I become bigger, but you also become bigger. So it's really trying to achieve a win-win situation in this negotiation process. And we're going to talk more later on. So now we are going to talk about the core part of this workshop, which is about how to negotiate and how to make decisions. And again, I know many of you are in the job market, and when we talk about negotiation, it's mostly about kind of job opportunities. But as I said, we'll use job offers as an example, but similar principles should be applied to many other situations. And later we'll have case studies, and case studies will have some job offer situations and other non-job offer type of situations. So first, when you get a job offer, I recommend never accept the offer on site. You can always say, I'm so excited, so grateful for this opportunity, but let me think a little more and discuss with family. I get that maybe next Monday, right? So this really gives you some time to think and plan for your negotiation. And this is a framework I recommend to every one of you. It's a 3R. It's research, reflect, and rehearsal. And we're going to talk about parts of one by one. So Kyle is going to help us to talk about the research part. Okay.
So we're all PhDs or soon to be PhDs, right? So this should be the part that makes the most sense, or that is the easiest in some regards. Researching our comparables, understanding what the benchmarks are for what we can expect in other kinds of spaces. So it's really important when you are in the research phase to gather your market and institutional data, not just on salary, but on things like benefits, cost of living in the area that you're going to be in, and other kinds of norms. You want to clarify what is typically negotiable within your field. Different fields will expect to negotiate different kinds of things. And then talk with peers, mentors, alumni who've been through similar offers so that you can get a sense of how your offer stacks up against other kinds of folks. So let's run through this for some different options. For salary and compensation data, there are tons and tons of different kinds of websites and tools available to you all over the place in order to learn more about where your salary offer might, land compared to other kinds of areas. So these are just some examples. And I'm going to have us look at 1220 real quick, because this is a WashU one. So this is a platform that you all have access to through WashU. And this is where we collect information on first destinations. So where our graduates end up and what kind of positions and industries they're with, what companies they're with, and what salaries they get in some of these initial job offers. So there's a lot of tools on here. The one in particular right now I want to focus on is, again, research tools. So relatively easy. We're sticking with research. And there's a bunch of different outcomes, different kinds of things that you can play with on here in terms of departments, in terms of pay periods, all sorts of things. I'm going to encourage focusing initially just on degree level. So focusing on doctoral, for example, that'll be one of the most applicable ones. And you can then sort and see what kinds of salaries our doctoral graduates have gotten in different industries, in different areas, right? So here we can see people who are in consulting, technology, finance, manufacturing, healthcare, energy, so on. A lot of different kinds of spaces in here. And you can drill down or expand the results. That gives you a little bit more information on years, on the job details, so the employers that are most common for our graduates. And you can also narrow it down into things like job title. Function, industry is not always going to be as much of a thing, and experience doesn't have as much info. But the job title piece can be very helpful for benchmarking what sort of, salaries you can expect along different kinds of job titles. So very useful tool on here. Highly recommend that you use it. Another one that I'll draw quick attention to is through WashU's CCE page, that we have a labor market insights tool. So if you go on to our careers.washu.edu and you hover over students, you'll see this tab for career engagement resources, and then explore job market trends. And in this one, you can type in a job title and, Just because we were just looking at consultant, I'm gonna, oh, but I can't type today. We'll click management analysts just for something. And you can break this down by like nationwide or by state, but just to start with, it'll provide an overview, obviously, of the job itself, but then you can see things like employment trends. You can see average educational levels, and you can see where the median annual earnings are. So again, very good tool for beginning to benchmark your salary offer and get a sense of where your offer might stand up against national averages. This is like none of the sites are necessarily comprehensive, so you want to use a variety when you're on this research part. Try a few different places and get different kinds of information. I don't recommend asking ChatGPT or another AI tool to provide you with salary information unless you are going to ask it to cite its sources and then evaluate those sources yourself. So otherwise, don't necessarily just take what it says, as the be all.
Here, for the labor market insight, skills needed for this job. But I do want to mention that database also is not only for PhDs, it also like students. So that's where you should look really toward the higher end. That's one thing. The second thing is about the 1220 tool. This is really a WashU internal tool, and you can filter by PhD students. So very good. And the Center for Career Engagement only started to collect this kind of data in the last 2 years. So the data is very valuable, but the database is also not that high yet. And I do want to encourage you, if you are going to graduate very soon or in the next 3 years, when we send the FDS, the first destination survey, please provide that information so that we can increase the database and make this available to future WashU students.
Yep. And last thing on the research side of this, for those of you who are going into academic careers, if you get a job offer from a public university or college, public universities and colleges in the United States are required by law to publish their salary information for all their employees, meaning that you can actually directly look up and do the numbers and calculate whether or not you are getting a decent offer compared to other people in your department, in your field, in that area. So very, very useful. Sometimes you have to find it. They don't always make it easy, but it's more standardized these days than it was when I was in my first grad program. Very useful tool.
One more comment about yeah, I think current students, the staff member access. You're welcome to email us. After
That is a great question. That's a great question. If you email us, we can try to find the answer for you. Yeah. So in terms of how much to negotiate on your salary, how much to ask for, this is a part that is very tricky, and this is not the be all end all. This is a rough kind of guide for how you might think about negotiating that initial offer. So you might ask for about 5 to 10% more if you're near like the midpoint of the range and the offer is fair, but maybe you have some competing priorities, some other offers on the table. And if you're early career, but without like major leverage in terms of like tons of projects or work experience behind you. You might ask for 10 to 15% more if you are below the market benchmark. So if you're, below the midpoint, especially if you have multiple offers that you can leverage. If you bring some kind of specialized expertise, if you have some technical or subject matter knowledge that is a little bit more rare. And if the company has like pretty wide salary bands. Some places have pretty large salary ranges that they might offer. WashU is one of them. You'll see a pretty expansive one, so there's more room to negotiate with that. You probably will not want to negotiate more than like 5% if it's an employer with more strict pay bands, especially certain universities and government. Government tends to be pretty strict about their pay bands. Public employers in general will have more rules around making sure that there's some sort of pay equity. And so typically speaking, it's like they can't bring in a new person at like a higher pay than someone who's been there for like a while or something. So there's often less room to negotiate on that front. And then some places, especially like with your postdocs, when you're going out to get a postdoc position, might have like fixed budgets. Or if you're applying to work with a grant funded program that has a very strict, like, this is how much we pay for this job. And employers will often be pretty upfront about that. You know, you'll hear a lot of employers try to say like, this is the most we can offer. But like, there's a real difference between like, ooh, this is like, you know, at the high end of our offer versus a place that says like, this is what we have for the position. That's what it is. And that's just our number. So a lot less room to kind of negotiate on that one.
Yeah. And also, really do your research. I think the goal is you want to aim at
Yeah.
Because very likely the other person will lower your what you ask, and then you can negotiate. Then extra bit. Yeah. And I just had a short conversation with Tyler, and he shared his experience. He asked, right? And get a very reasonable salary, which is much higher than other colleagues. And we are talking about you want to aim high, but still reasonable, right? I think you also mentioned that you don't want make an ask that is like unrealistic, and that will leave a bad.
In some jobs,
No. Don't ask for more than the max of the range, because that's usually something that's set by company policy, and there's not going to be negotiation room past that point.
Usually, the range is very wide.
Huh. To be honest, it's in the academic kind of spaces for faculty sorts of pieces, and in a lot of industries, it's rare to get at the high end of the range anyway. You're probably going to be negotiating in your first job out of grad school or your postdoc more towards the middle of the range. That just is where it'll kind of tend these days. Not universally. It depends again on what you're bringing to the table, what kind of research that you've done, how badly they want you, a whole variety of other kinds of pieces. Yeah.
It would be good to give the high end really for people who already like 20 years.
All right. So some other things to research and to consider and potentially negotiate with outside of just salary. So salary is not the be all end all, right? Even within compensation, both within academic and industry positions, there's a lot else that goes into compensation. So for an academic job, not all academic jobs, for example, have summer salary, but that could be something that you might be able to negotiate into it, or just negotiating the distribution of your salary so that it also encompasses the summer as well. For those of you in STEM fields or ones with labs, there are startup funds that often get negotiated in that initial piece. Insurance, childcare, sometimes moving expenses. These are all pieces that may enter into a negotiation or a decision-making portion. With industry, bonuses, like signing bonuses, are a big piece. That's something that is very frequently a point of negotiation that you can work on. Again, insurance and childcare and moving expenses are pieces that might be able to come in as well. So those kinds of startup funds can be really helpful and can make an initial sort of difference. Yeah.
industry, does it matter? Is that a profit and
Not Inherently, no, not inherently. More be aware that like depending on nonprofits will tend to have less money to play with, not universally, but as a general rule of thumb, than for-profit companies. So they may not be able to offer you quite as much, but that does depend a little bit on the companies. Like very new startups may not have a lot of extra funds to play with, even if they're for-profit, and a very well-established national nonprofit may have great resources available to you. But it doesn't change the fundamentals of what you want to try to fix.
And even between academia and industry, you can see a lot of similarities as well. Like salary, bonus. Academia also have bonus, even though it's not as high as that in industry.
Yeah.
And insurance, childcare, moving expense, things like that. The slight difference could be like academia. If you establish in your lab, you have a startup fund, and industry you may have like signing bonus. I think that is common. In academia, I rarely hear about that. Or in industry, you may have equity if you work on one startup. So you can see a lot of similarities. This is really universal. So let alone to see between the for-profit and non-for-profit industry.
Something I forgot to include, retirement funds, like matching retirement funds, especially with for-profit companies, there can be room to negotiate in greater contributions to your 401k IRA or other retirement options. And that can be really beneficial. Matching retirement funds from a company are super helpful for long term. You can also consider and potentially negotiate some of the workload. So particularly for academia, teaching and research time are pieces that can be negotiated. You can potentially negotiate down the number of courses that you are going to teach, or I don't even negotiate up if you want to teach more courses or do less research. Doesn't tend to go that way, but sometimes. You also want to consider like what the service expectations are, what the vacation policies are, and what kind of flexibility are offered within the roles. Within industry, thinking about things like your project scopes, what exactly are you going to be working on? What are the expectations and benchmarks coming in? What is like your team size, hours? Again, things like vacation days and work flexibility are big. A lot of places, especially in the private sector, will negotiate vacation time, give you like extra vacation time if they're not able to necessarily meet like salary expectations. So you can get more paid time off. Resources we kind of touched on, lab space, equipment, and support staff are things you might be able to talk about with as an academic. But in industry, training, mentorship, promotional pathways, and professional development funds are all things that you can negotiate into a startup or into a starting offer. A lot of companies will have dedicated funds of like, every one of our employees gets this much money for professional development every year to either take classes, go to conferences, or whatnot. And you might be able to increase that amount. Environment, not always something that you can negotiate, but definitely something that you want to be considering in the decision-making process. So what the fit is like, and what the culture of the organizations are like, what the management styles are, what the expectations for promotion and tenure are, things along those lines. There's maybe a little bit more space in industry to sometimes negotiate things like promotion expectations or who your manager is. Those are also pieces that you can kind of talk about. And then, of course, personal issues like your location, family needs and stability, relocation funds, maybe visa support, hybrid work options, your precise start time. Start time is actually one of those that probably gets negotiated more than anything else in a lot of cases, like starting at a time that is going to be convenient for you, that's going to match up well, especially if you are moving somewhere else to work, somewhere that you're not currently living. And these days, it's not like negotiation in terms of hybridity or like remote work is not as common as it was a few years ago, but it is still definitely a thing that I see. So I've known people, for example, who negotiate to work the first 2 months remote while they're getting themselves set up to move to a new place or something like that.
I also want to have a comment here. All of those things can be negotiated, but how much room you can negotiate could be very different depending on the situation. For example, salary, there is a lot of room to negotiate. Starting time, teaching research, division has a lot of room to negotiate. However, for example, vacation days, sometimes for smaller companies, maybe it's more negotiable. But for big companies, usually they have their certain policy. They may say, okay, if you are under 5 years of working in this company, then you only get 3 weeks of vacation. And if it is more than that, then you have another level of vacation. So the negotiation room might be smaller for those big companies. And another example is the retirement plan. Sometimes it's also dependent on how many years you have worked for this company. If you're under 5 years, for example, it would be a 5% match. But if you are more than 5 years, maybe it's another level. But in any case, I think all of those things are something that we need to think, and we can try to negotiate. But how much we can negotiate is really dependent on the specific situation.
That's where going in with it as a conversation is the important kind of piece. My dad, in a previous role at a university, negotiated a parking permit as part of his starting package. When I came here, I didn't have to pay for parking at a previous institution, but I knew I'd have to get a permit here. And I was like, can you guys kick in a permit? And they're like, we can't technically do that, but we could add on this kind of bonus at the start to, pay offset cost and stuff. So there's, again, it's a conversation. It's a dialogue that you can work out options with.
I didn't know time out for the
Yeah.
negotiation, so that's great. He is very successful.
All right. Come on. There we go.
So now it becomes the second part, which is, so we talked about research, reflect, rehearse, finish the research part. And this is really the foundation. And you have to do homework. You have to do in-depth homework to be able to really have the advantage to do negotiation. But the next step, reflect, I think is also very important. That really determines how you're going to show up. Because you have to believe in yourself. Otherwise, it's hard to negotiate. You have to believe this is a reasonable ask. This aligns with my value and my priorities. So that's why I really recommend you do some careful reflection before you go for the negotiation. Identify what is important to you. What are your top priorities? You cannot get everything, but what are the few key things you really want to negotiate with? And what is the deal breakers? That means what are some of the things that is non-negotiable? And if they didn't meet this criteria, then I may not be able to accept this offer. So think about your deal breakers. And also, when you negotiate this offer, really not just focus on this offer itself, because everything is actually connected. Think about your long-term goal. Think about other things, such as your family members, a lot of different things you want to really take into consideration. And as Kyle said, there are a lot of things that you can negotiate with. So really think about the trade-off. If salary is not negotiable, can we think about other benefits and other things? Again, there are a lot of things we can do trade-off. And as part of the list exercise, again, I'm a scientist, so I like everything to quantify and help me to disentangle my thoughts and make more rational decisions. So I really recommend this framework. It's called decision metrics. And this is also not only used by me, but used by many other people. There are a lot of books about it, a lot of theories about it. So what I'm suggesting you is really first think, what are some of the important things to you? And for example, if it is a job offer, maybe those things are important for me, base salary and other compensation. Again, if you want to really break it down, you can break it down even more, right? I may think, okay, the company culture and it should be good, and it also the type of work or the type of business should align with my value. That is important. maybe research resources and other tools that are available to me is important. My growth, my professional development opportunities is important. Location, cost of living. So you can list all the things that matter to you, and then assign a weight to each one of those. Like some of the things may matter to you more than others, so give a different weight. For example, I really pay attention to whether the company's value aligns with my value. So I will assign a high score 5 over there. And also I pay a lot of attention to growth opportunities. So higher score again. But I probably do not mind like the location, so a lower score. Once you do this, and say you have several options or several offers, ideally, maybe just options, then you can give for each of the criteria you can assign a score, because each different offers or different options will have pros and cons. So you will develop this type of decision matrix, and then you are going to calculate the weight score. I know the real situation is more complicated than this, but this type of exercise helps you to really think through things and help you know what are the things that are important to you and help you to make more informed and rational decisions. So Chinese, I have used this type of decision matrix in many of the important decisions I have to make, no matter whether it is related to my career or related to my personal work. Like for example, recently my family is facing a situation whether we want to support our students to go to public school or private school. You know, we did this type of decision matrix, and that helps us to make informed decisions. So as part of the reflection exercise, I think at the end of it, we really need to be clear. When you go through this negotiation, what is your goal? What do you want to achieve? Yeah, and you really want to understand what do you really want? What do you want? Again, we talked about non-negotiables or deal breakers, right? But not only what you want, sometimes we really want more than what we need. More importantly is what do you really need to make sure you are successful in this job, or to make sure you are successful, you know, as a family, in your family. So those things you have to do a lot of self-reflections, write down things that really matter to you, and really identify your goal in this negotiation. And then comes to the rehearsal part. I will stop here for the reflection part. Any questions so far? Even though this is like very kind of like you know, basic, but I personally see that is one of the most different things. You have to understand yourself. You have to know what you want to be able to show up strong and articulate your needs and present your rationales, you know, reasonably. So to recommend, I know many times we just do our research without really do a lot of reflections, and that negotiation may not go that well. So really need to do both research and reflection. And then we come to the rehearsal part. Just like you go for your interview, you have to do a lot of rehearsal practice. Similarly, negotiation, I think not a lot of people are very naturally good at it. So we have to practice. We even have to practice harder than we practice our interviews. So practice the conversation out loud many times. And also think about what other people will say and how am I going to respond. Really think about different scenarios and make the conversation so natural that is more convincing. You don't want to try to remember what you want to say. Really kind of use alternative phrasing to express your points, and do some role play with a career coach here with us, or with your family member or friend. The more you practice, the better, the more confident you will be. And when you do rehearsal, what are some of the broad principles? First, always pay attention to the relationship. Negotiations is a conversation. So you want to establish connection first. Always start with something positive before you share about your ask. You can say something like, I'm very excited about this opportunity, blah, 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 and then talk about other things. And this is so important. Small act, right, make a big difference. This, in any other type of situation, this trick also works. Always start with something positive. Show appreciation. And then that sets the foundation for the rest of the conversation. And then ask, don't demand. I think this is very basic. Instead of say, I want ABC. Okay, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna ask, how common is it for negotiations to happen in person? Like, or is it common for them to happen via email? Like they send you an offer and then you think about it and you reply with some type of, I guess, counter offer in that case? Or is it common for these types of conversations to actually be had either face to face or virtually via Zoom or via phone call?
Most likely this will be a phone.
Okay.
Yeah. Unless, you're really in town and it's very good to most likely it's over phone. It's rarely you happen that Zoom based on this point. You really don't need, sometimes it could happen in, especially in academic setting, quickly set up. So more likely it's phone or Zoom virtual settings, rarely by email. Because this is really a conversation. You don't want to go back and forth 10 times. Yeah.
It depends on the culture of the place to the industry too, There may be places where the first, like the offer is sent an email and you maybe respond with your initial kind of like asks through email, but it always moves towards in person. It always concludes in person. Or, well, phone or Zoom, like a conversation.
Yeah. Yes. Any other question? Okay, so you can say, is there any flexibility in this or that? Could we do this and that? It's not demand, it's really negotiation, it's really suggesting a idea, a solution here. And again, in the negotiation, don't focus too many things, otherwise you cannot get focus on maybe top 1 or 3. What are your goals, right? And then this is really the core part. Back up with evidence. I think we are trained as scientists, no matter whether we are in humanity or in STEM. Really back up with evidence, with data, with your arguments, so that you can hopefully convince others, right? Based on the market benchmarks, or my personal experience, or some of the research I have done. This is A and B and C. Provide your evidence. And then nobody just wants to complain. Everybody's welcoming a solution, a potential solution that is really win-win situations. So you can say, here is what I propose. And then really think about others, right? Why this proposal is good for others? Keep your brand as well. And that's more likely to get buy-in. Always throughout the process, again, relationship is key. If you ruin the relationship, then that's really bad. We want to try everything to avoid that. Always maintain a collaborative and a friendly, appreciative relationship in this process. And lastly, here is use silence. Don't just ramble. I think sometimes some students said that. I'm very bad at this, but I'm learning more, especially in my coaching appointment. Now I started to use silence as a strategy. Silence, the good silence is actually a very important skill, especially in negotiation process. Strategically use silence to make other people feel a little bit nervous, and that help you win this negotiation. And also think about timing, right? If you sense the relationship gets a little tense, a good trick is just to say, I wonder whether we can maybe come back to this point on next Monday. Could we discuss this another day? We don't have to really talk in that nervous and stressful situation. Find another time. when each one of you have a little more thinking, have a little more research being done, and then come back into the conversation. Yeah. So some sample language here. Again, start with something positive, show your evidence, show your reasons. I'm thrilled about this role and team. Based on similar positions, I was wondering if there is room for my salary closer to this number. My reasons are, then you can talk about what your research is about, how other similar positions are paid. You know, you can elaborate a little more. To successfully establish my lab, I'd like to explore the possibility. Again, you are not demand, you really suggesting and explore the possibility of increasing the startup package by 100K. And you propose a solution. And this is because, again, back with your evidence. And here is another thing you want to negotiating another time. I'm very excited about this opportunity. Start with something positive. To make the best decision, I'd like to discuss this offer with my family. Would next Monday work for me to follow up with you? So find another time to talk. And we coached students before, and some of the situations they encountered is, and this is a great way to negotiate. They have a lever here. Is, for example, you like company A, but got a higher paying offer from company B. And this is something you don't have to follow this, but the principle is here. Again, start with something positive. I want to reiterate that I'm very excited about this opportunity, blah, 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 blah. And then I did want to mention that I recently received another offer with a total compensation of this much, which put me in a difficult conversation since your role is actually my top choice. Would it be possible to explore whether there is flexibility in this? Again, it's suggested, and that has with evidence and everything. So remain very respectful and factual and focus on the problem solving. Another example here is sometimes you need to go negotiate the timeline as well. Maybe one job you are still in the deciding process, and another job you already got the offer. So in this case, you can say, I want to share that I've recently received another offer, and their deadline for decision is this day. I'm still very interested in your role, and I was wondering if there is any chance we could discuss timeline so that I can make informed decisions, things like that. Again, those are just some examples, and hopefully all of those principles you can apply in your future job negotiation. So negotiation is really a skill, and it's a conversation, and it could be very tough. And you have to evaluate the situation like moment by moment, right? And at some point, your negotiation may be different. And what should we do? And here, again, I'm going to share some principles. Again, stay positive, right? We talked about being professional. We talked about focusing on relationships throughout the process. You can say something, thank you for considering my request. I really appreciate the transparency. And then you ask for more details. You ask for more information and context. So this way you can learn a little more information on the other side. And hopefully that can help you to have better ideas of negotiate, and that use the time to think, to articulate by propose this question and learn how other people to speak. So can you share what constraints are driving this decision? And then re-anchor gently, right? Remember, you have your goal, you have your research, and maybe you have shared it once, but this information may not come through yet. You may, when it is appropriate, you may want to kind of reiterate here a little bit, and maybe back with more evidence. Reinforcement is important here. Yeah. Again, I understand the constraints based on my experience and market analysis. I was hoping we can do this or do that. Is there any flexibility at all? And as I said, if this one thing doesn't work out, we can always also shift to other negotiables. If we're not open to adjust the base salary now, would it be possible to talk about flexibilities? Yeah. Work schedules, things like that. And of some point, so you keep negotiating, and how to make decision in this process. And if we talked about non-negotiables, right? And if really doesn't meet your non-negotiables, then very sadly you just have to decline. But if yes, then you need to ask yourself, should I continue to negotiate or should I accept this offer? And hopefully by this exercise, the condition is more and more closer to what you want. And you are eventually going to accept the offer. And for all the things that you negotiate about, I highly recommend you indicate that in some kind of document. It would be in the job offer letter. Sometimes for smaller things like your professional development support is, or your other things. Sometimes it's not included in the job offers, but still it's very helpful for you to follow up with an email. You can say, thank you for a great conversation today. Based on our discussion, this is what we agreed. And then accept the offer. So in future, this can serve as a document for you to rediscuss.
This is really critical. Like any negotiation, any offer is only as good as the paper it's written on.
And this principle, well, especially if there is disagreement. At the end of the day, once you have some decisions made, you have to take paper and have to share with others. So in this way, this serves as evidence for future conversations. Otherwise, people may really kind of don't agree with what they're saying. Yeah.
Is it bigger negotiating with the person you interviewed with? How often are you completely different or even like higher?
You repeat.
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
How often are you negotiating with the person you interviewed with, or like your direct manager, and how often is it higher or anything?
Yeah, that could also be different based on the jobs you apply to. In academia, usually you may negotiate with your hiring manager or your committee chair, things like that, for interview you and who you are also going to do negotiation. In industry, your hiring manager will interview you, but for the negotiation part, they usually hand it over to the HR team. So it's a different person. And remember, in that situation, the HR is trying their best to hire you because the hiring manager wants you. Yeah, so you have really some advantage in this process. Do you have any comment?
No, that's, yeah, it'll vary a little bit, but academia more often with the person you interviewed with, industry more often with some sort of HR.
I don't know if you still but do you like how would it of like
Definitely, you can take that into consideration. Again, AI, but still reasonable, right? Yeah, because you bring the same experience. Yeah, that's a man. Yeah.
That's where it can be, if you can get the metrics, it can be very, very helpful. And if you can articulate, make the case that you're being lowballed, then that can be, then that can add kind of reinforced power to your case. There is a gender bias that you can risk running into. But then you also have kind of the question of like, is this the company I want to work at?
Great point. Okay.
And it did have the hiring manager that application.
Okay. CC him, right? CC that person, the hiring manager. So everybody's same page. And what happens behind the scene is the HR person is in direct communication with the hiring manager. So they should be on the same page when they make the final decision. Okay, again, negotiation is such a huge topic, right? I know some of the postdoc recently attended a negotiation workshop in the on the medical campus in the postdoc symposium. And the 1.5 hours is never going to cover all of them. And this is also a lesson that we need to learn throughout our life. So here are some books that we highly recommend. I read some of those books, and again, I practiced those skills in my personal life, in my careers. Is helpful. So for those who really want to dive deeper on this topic, those are some of the recommendations. So now we are going to do some case studies. Any other questions before we move on? We have 4 case studies here covering different scenarios. Okay, later we'll have more Q&A time. So here is one offer in academia become an assistant professor. And you know, this is the institution, offer summaries, base summary is 85,000 for 9 months. You can read through this. You have startup package, last phase, teaching notes, moving, annual review, benefits. I want everybody also to participate, as if you are the one who received this offer. And based on your own situation, what are some of the things you will consider? What stands out as strong or weak? What questions would you ask? What is negotiable for you? And how are you going to handle that?
I would look at metrics for the retirement action, other comparable universities to see if they exist.
I don't know if this is vague on purpose, but I would also look into like mental health insurance, what it would like dental and vision, like
Great. Yeah, do more research. For the retirement match, I haven't done thorough research, but I have worked for more than 4 employers. I want to share my own experience. It's very competitive. But do your research. And for the insurance part, again, as I said, a lot of things can be negotiated, but you really want to identify the most important things, right? For insurance, usually also for example, at least in WashU, they have the insurance policy. Usually is medical, dental, vision are included in the whole package. And yeah, that part is usually quite standard. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I would try to figure out that lab space is fair, like go to the university and see if the rooms of lab space is we think, especially if you're sharing access to the core facility.
Yeah, we give this workshop to another group of students. One student said, I am a plant researcher. I need a much larger space to grow my plants. So great point.
To me, what stood out is actually the teaching load, because I think 2 courses a year is a lot. Especially if this is maybe tenure track and it might have, I don't know, that is the first thing I would negotiate, because I think other things are fair. But I think maybe like negotiate maybe after tenure, then it's more considerable to move some courses that you like that.
Yeah, that's a great point, right? Maybe wait until you finish your tenure, then start to teach. That might be too hard, but you can negotiate to say maybe in the first 1 or 2 years, I'm starting a lab. I reduce that teachable load, this example. And do research, but it's a great point. Yeah.
I think the department's gonna cover summer salary for the first few years if the grant comes in. And they also, or it also be stipends for grad students come out of the SAR package with 7.
It's not clear what the PTO is for this role or like the university in general.
Yes, yeah, sure. Yeah, we'll add that in future in this case. Yeah, usually the vacation time is kind of set. Like how much time it takes, it's varies.
And honestly, no one really keeps track of
tenure track faculty their PTO very well, so they kind of get to do what they want. What do y'all think of the salary? Terrible? Seems a little weak, right? For, okay, 2 courses a year for this startup package, we can infer this is probably an R1. Seems kind of low. Might be something you want to research on, see what this is a state university. You probably find the salary info online. See if they're lowballing you.
First, things you can look at, and then do your research, and then set your own goal, and then come up with what things you want to negotiate and achieve your goal. Okay, so we move to another case study here. This is an industry offer. Scientist one and a biotech company. And again, those are the offer summary. And I want also you to think about what stands out strong, what are some stands out weak. What could you ask to clarify or adjust? What are some of your priorities if you get this offer?
I would ask for clarification. Because up to 10% does not then. Usually based on my previous experience, they actually rate the entire like all the employees, and then they will give you like the percentile, like you're above or underperform, and then that determines your votes.
Exactly. How you are going to evaluate performance, right? What are the different tracks?
But I guess this depends on where this is, but for biotech, it's been a little for. But you have to
Yeah, and it's very much also location based, also industry based, title based. Scientist one, and scientist two, the pay could be very different.
That relocation, seems a little low to me, especially with the cost of rent, being like in the thousands average, so that doesn't really cover the physical moving part. That just covers like first and last month's, if that.
And later, I mean, for some people who already have a house, sometimes they are going to help you sell their house, and they also give you first month's rental free, things like that. So there are a lot of things involved with moving parts. Yeah, great point. One more?
Is there any fund for professionals?
Professional development.
I would also say the start date, as a Tuesday. Which seems a little odd to start work on a Tuesday to me.
Also, when's commencement?
Yeah, that's before commencement, so.
Like, y'all are graduating, you probably want to, have maybe half a moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We probably will also negotiate depending on what type of research I'm doing, right? Could I argue for one hybrid work instead of 5 days? Again, everybody has different needs, and you really want to consider and to see what makes sense to you. Okay, quickly another two. So this is not job related, but I think many of us may encounter that as well. It's about authorship. So you are a fourth-year PhD student. You designed and executed most of the project, but a senior postdoc contributed to some key analysis, and your PI said, let's make this a co-author first paper. However, you really expect you are the only first author for this paper. What are you going to do? Yeah.
Usually make an expression. What great. Senior postdoc.
could also like approach a potential compromise could be, yes, you do co-first authorships that as you can negotiate like that I would like to be in the first position on the co-authorship, and that I would expect the postdoc to also contribute to like the introduction and discussion, have like more writing contributions. So like if they like just contributing one like some key analyses like isn't like to me enough to warrant like also big point.
Like say like, well, why don't they do second author? Then they can come back and say, well, then they second, like second go first. Ready to something like that.
Yeah. Yes.
So they're also expected to help significantly address the. And that would bump up their contribution to the paper. Especially if they, because at this point you've already written it, manuscript, assuming and all this other stuff. So once they do their revisions, that would potentially require that you modify the writing in the manuscript, etc. So that would, they take on that role as well. That's starting to get more in the position of you should be the culprit.
Great.
Just one analysis.
Except the expectation here, right? What else?
Because it depends on where this project is. But if like, say you've written most of it already, and it's a hefty paper, you can propose doing the second or bigger a different journal, and that includes like that analysis that's big enough, like the possibilities like this bigger work into two paper, which would benefit everyone.
Yeah, great suggestions. I like all those concepts. Yeah. Yeah. Do you think this might be a good one? Like this one, we kind of do you a favor and I'll go first author and hopefully I will also contribute to some of your projects and then I will become a author in your paper. What do you think of this?
And it would work, but I want to establish. Alternatively, if this working student wants to leave, getting them out faster is putting this person on.
Yeah. Yeah, again, there is no right answer or wrong answer. Each situation is different, but you can see so many different possibilities, right? And the relationship is key. Your relationship with your PI, your relationship with that postdoc, not only right now, right? Down the road. That person may become your collaborator, may refer you to some other jobs. So always think about the long-term goal here. Okay, last example here, workload and boundary negotiation. You are a postdoc and you have a very productive lab. And recently you are leading 3 projects already. You are mentoring 2 students. And now you are asked to help with another grant-related project. And your PI say, this will be great opportunity for you, great exposure for you. But you are already working nights over the weekends. What are you going to do? What are some of your considerations? Things like stages of the 3 projects, but I say another projects, you have to be like stages of each project. So. Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of like understanding your own priorities as well. And your time projects. What else?
Since it says you're already working nights and weekends, I'm not sure just adding that project on top of your other work would be feasible or reasonable. So I think there would need to be a discussion on, is there other work that someone else could do or that I could temporarily drop so I could help out with this project? Like what, you could ask what the BI's priorities are in terms of like work they would like you to do.
Yeah. Ask collaborations, ask working. So just solutions. Right.
I was thinking along the same lines, like asking your PI for guidance, mentorship in this situation. I'm sure they've been in situations where they've have to reprioritize things. So thinking about like, oh, this is really good exposure for me. Did some other of these other projects be shared with somebody else, or could I have different roles in the aspects of those others?
Learn from others with the negotiation process. What else? I would also ask, am I really interested in this one? Right opportunity? Like say if I'm interested in industry, I probably don't care that much about grant writing opportunity. So the self-reflection part, I think becomes very important in this process. What else? Kyle, do you have any comments?
Yeah, no, I was going to say something similar. Like, the PI says it's going to be great exposure, but think about exposure towards what purpose? Like, is it driving you exposure in the direction that you want it to be driving you? Because maybe, your PI might have slightly different views on that.
And also understand the expectation, right? If I get both with this grant, what do you expect? To each time, I will be responsible. How much do you expect that? Things like that. Definitely, you know, for other projects, really think about priorities, think about what you can dedicate, all those type of things. Okay, I think this.
We have one more.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Exposure, like, they go by like concrete things you might get out of it, like depending on how much work you put onto the project, would you get an authorship, would you be in the acknowledgements, would you not be mentioned at all? That sort of thing.
Yeah, OPI can be great. That's 3 points. Set up expectation upfront, right? Okay, I think that's toward the end of our presentation and workshop. To still have about few more minutes. If you have any remaining questions, feel free to ask.